Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad you're with us for the Wednesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. And it's also our last regular edition of the Three Martini Lunch for the year. But fear not, we are going to have 6 special year-end editions starting tomorrow and on Friday, and then Tuesday through Friday of next week. There'll be no episode on Christmas Day. Going through all of our award selections, as we do every year, for most overrated, underrated, honest political figures, rising stars, fading into oblivion, best and worst idea, best and worst political theater, biggest lie, overreported, underreported, all that stories of the year, all that kind of stuff. And then, of course, it will all come to a conclusion on Friday, December 29th, when Jim and I each choose our Person of the Year, Turncoat of the Year, and we offer our predictions for 2024. And Jim, given what we got in the last 24 hours, predicting next year is going to be pretty darn tough. I already had some ideas for what we might talk about today, and then I saw that news break yesterday evening. I'm like, well, I guess I know what we're talking about now, but we'll get to Trump in Colorado in just a second. Our good martini comes closer to home in the form of Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin. And no, this has nothing to do with sports arenas or a new stadium or anything like that this time. Jury's still out on that one. We'll see what the details are, if it happens at all. Jim, one of the issues that's been on the radar politically in Virginia for a very long time is the personal property tax, known better as the car tax. In fact, the first Virginia governor's race that I was privy to when I moved here was 1997, when Jim Gilmore, who you refer to often from his 2016 presidential campaign, but he was actually elected governor in 1997 on the heels of a successful governorship of George Allen, promising to end the car tax, a very popular move. He was able to reduce it. It was supposed to be phased out, which is always a terrible idea because once Democrats get power, they always decide not to phase it out, and that's what Mark Warner did once he became governor. But now Glenn Youngkin wants to kill it dead. In fact, in his address to the General Assembly, he wants bipartisan support to get this done. And here's a little bit of what he said and what he thinks of the tax.
And therefore, I both invite and challenge my colleagues in the General Assembly to work with me to completely eliminate the hated car tax and replace it with a further increase in local sales taxes. The car tax belongs in the trash can, not in your mailbox.
You should not pay taxes on anything you've already bought. That's my position. And so, Jim, in addition to Mark Warner stopping the phase out, Bob McDonnell, who had promised not to raise our taxes, agreed to a car tax hike as part of his big transportation bill in 2013, which I certainly loathed. And then locally here in my county, our Democratic board jacked up the rates last year. Or actually earlier this year. So it's certainly something he's right that people hate. I don't know if he's going to get Democrats who will control both chambers to go along with this. But if he can, it'd be a big political win.
It would be, Greg. And when you mentioned this as a potential topic for today's show, I'm not going to lie. My thought was, oh, my God, 8 to 10 to 12 years from now, Glenn Youngkin is going to run for president. He's going to do really badly in Iowa. He's going to get 11 votes. And the next week, I'm going to see him in an interview insisting he's going to be president and he's going to win New Hampshire. Sadly, that's what I think of. That's the first thing that pops into mind when I think of Jim Gilmore. And Jim Gilmore was, I'm going to eliminate the car tax, come hell or high water. He was absolutely determined. Big factor in his gubernatorial election victory. And unfortunately, he was not able to get it done. I think your position, like there are a lot of good things about living in our state of Virginia. The car tax is not one of them. And I think that it is very tough to justify. I looked it up. The state of Virginia has a 4.15% sales and use tax whenever you buy a car. That applies to new cars. That applies to used cars. If you sell your car to somebody else, this kicks in all those circumstances. So as far as I'm concerned, the government has already taken its share because you've purchased your car. This tax basically says, well, we, the state of Virginia, we've decided you have to pay a tax just for the privilege of owning a car. It's not based on mileage. It's not based on use. It's just, no, you own a car and we've assessed that it's this much, so you have to pay us for the privilege of owning a car. And I think most Virginians look at that and say, that's nonsense. This is not, you could say, oh, well, we need it for roads. All right, well, in Virginia, we already pay 26 cents a gallon in gasoline tax. It's 27 cents a gallon for diesel. Wait, what are we getting in exchange for this tax? This is just, what did we do to deserve this? Why are you taking money from us basically on that car? It's not doing anything. It's not necessarily inflicting any cost upon the government. If you want to say, oh, it's the roads, well, we're already paying for that in the gas tax. So what is this one for? Republicans hate it. I think most Virginians hate it. I'd love to see this get going. Look, we know that there's a very narrow Democratic majority in state legislatures. Conceivably, I could see some Democrats sweating this vote, at least. I could see them not really wanting to be on the hook for defending the car tax. I'm not enormously optimistic, but I salute Governor Youngkin for pushing for this, and we'll see if some progress can be made over the coming 2 years.
I generally like Glenn Youngkin, as we talked about last week or whenever we had the arena discussion. But I have to ask, where was this a month or two ago or 3 months ago? If people hate this so much, which they do, this would have been a great campaign issue, because in areas of the state where you probably have more people who are receptive to the Democrats' abortion campaign, they also care a lot about their pocketbook, and this could have been a real good issue to try and peel away some of those votes in some of those key legislative races, and then you'd be in a much better position to do this. In my county, the backlash to the increase in the car tax was so severe that they pushed it past the normal deadline, which is early October, to the end of the year, so people wouldn't have to write that check a couple of weeks before Election Day, especially since there was early voting then. And so to jump on that would have been absolutely brilliant, and I don't know why it didn't come up sooner, particularly in some of the areas of the state that pay more, because in Northern Virginia, Hampton Roads, the more populated areas, the car tax is actually higher. Thank you again, Bob McDonnell. So again, my suspicion is the Democratic leadership in the chambers won't want their members to have to take a tough vote, so they're just going to pretend it didn't happen. But Youngkin can certainly put a lot of pressure on, because there's a lot of people, regardless of your political stripe, who think that tax is stupid. It's like property taxes after you've bought your house. Like you very well explained, I've already paid for it. Get off my lawn.
Oh, actually, the Virginia Democrats probably want to tax the lawn too.
They do. Yeah, they probably see the car tax as some sort of like climate revenue now, because I
was going to say, if Maryland Democrats tax the rain because of the runoff tax, then you probably, tax the lawn. We can count each individual blade. It's only 2 cents per blade of grass. All
right, let's talk about our fantastic sponsor of Omaha Steaks. Look, it is December 20th. That means you've only got a few more days until Christmas. And if you're scratching your head trying to figure out what can I get this wonderful person in my family or this great friend of mine, I'm just not sure what they would like. If you know that they love fantastic steaks and burgers, get them a box of Omaha Steaks. I've been a recipient as a gift. I've been a recipient as a result of them sponsoring the show, and it is phenomenal. The butcher's cut filet mignons, the mouth-watering burgers. You'll love the flavor. They come with other sides as well, which really round out the meal well. Go to omahasteaks.com and take advantage of 50% off site-wide. Plus, use the code Martini at checkout and get an additional $30 off your order. But take another look at that calendar. Time is getting short. Hurry, this sale ends soon. Visit omahasteaks.com and save big with 50% off site-wide. Plus, use the promo code Martini at checkout to get that extra $30 off your order. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code Martini at checkout. Minimum order may be required. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini now. And I think both of us can agree there's a lot to unpack on this bad martini. Again, last evening discovered this ruling 4-3 from the Colorado Supreme Court, reversing a lower court ruling that had ruled that Donald Trump could stay on the ballot, even though the lower court had actually argued that he had, inspired what they considered an insurrection. And then the state Supreme Court comes in and says, well, because of that, he's off the ballot. The official wording is a majority of the court holds that President Trump is disqualified from holding the office of president under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. Because he is disqualified, it would be a wrongful act under the election code for the Colorado Secretary of State to list him as a candidate on the presidential primary ballot. The court is staying its ruling until January 4th, subject to further appellate proceedings. Now, if you're not familiar with the 14th Amendment in Section 3, it says no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or any state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive officer or judicial officer of any state to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. Now, the 14th Amendment, of course, came in the wake of the Civil War. It includes the Equal Protection Clause most famously. And so that's what the framers had in mind. Obviously, the majority on this court, Jim, believes that what Trump did in leading up to January 6th and on that day constitutes an insurrection. He has not been charged with that in a legal way. The argument on the right, of course, is that, wow, the pro-democracy crowd really has a problem with democracy and giving the people the chance to have their preferred candidates on the ballot. The Democrats, of course, are defending what the court is doing here. It's all going to end up at the Supreme Court. And obviously, you had a lot to say about it on the Morning Jolt today.
First and foremost, I kind of feel like if you're going to kick somebody off the ballot for committing a crime, you really ought to have a conviction. And right now, the Colorado Supreme Court does not have a conviction. In fact, Donald Trump has not been indicted on leading an insurrection. Now, you may have noticed Donald Trump has been indicted on a whole bunch of charges, right? We're up to 91 in 4 different jurisdictions. But none of those jurisdictions have indicted Trump on leading an insurrection. Now, I don't think it's that, Jack Smith forgot. I don't think that he overlooked it. I don't think he's unaware of the law. I think the reasonable conclusion is either that Smith believes that, he did not commit this crime under this particular definition, or he thinks he would not be able to get a jury to convict Trump on this charge. Now, he feels really good about his chances of convicting Donald Trump on a whole bunch of other stuff, but he does not believe it on this one. This should be a glaring sign. This should be a giant flashing warning sign that the Colorado State Supreme Court cannot just decide, well, I know he's not been convicted, but we really think he's committed a crime. So because he committed that crime, he cannot appear on this ballot. As noted, this decision was 4-3. I saw some people saying, well, it's a bunch of Democratic judges appointed by Democratic governors. All 7 justices were nominated by Democratic governors. Sadly, we don't have any more Bill Owens judges on there. So that by itself isn't really the issue. There are 3 Democratic appointed judges who looked at this and say, Greg, we should note that Michigan's Court of Appeals ruled that Trump could remain on the state's primary ballot, could not be disqualified from running under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. And last month, the Minnesota Supreme Court came to the same conclusion. And I don't think you can say that either of those courts are big fans of Trump. In the end, this is not about what do you think of Trump. And I think what's going to be really frustrating about that is how much the debate about this Colorado State Supreme Court decision ruling is going to revolve around what do you think of Trump, when that's not really at issue. The issue is, what is the law? Does the law apply in this case? And is the application of the law in this circumstance consistent with the U.S. Constitution? I was on Hugh Hewitt's program this morning. Hugh's very confident. He thinks this is going to go 9-0. He thinks that not even Justice Sonia Sotomayor could look at this and say, oh yeah, Colorado State Supreme Court, they know what they're doing. This is constitutional. This is legally right. I wish I had Hugh's confidence. I do think it's going to, the U.S. Supreme Court's going to look at this and say, nope, you can't do this. I don't know whether it's going to be 6-3, 7-2, 8-1, or 9-0. I also note that you're already seeing arguments of, Trump appointed 3 of the justices, so they should all recuse themselves. And, Ginny Thomas is very outspoken, so Clarence Thomas. So the argument is like we know the Supreme. I don't know for certain. It's extremely likely the Supreme Court's going to look at Colorado and say, can't do this. And you're going to hear voices on the left arguing that this is another case of the Supreme Court being illegitimate. They shouldn't have decided. These guys should have recused. Blah 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 blah. I just wrote into the Washington Post that if you want to Trump always says, I am being victimized. The deep state is out to get me. I am judged by an unfair standard, and institutions that are supposed to be impartial are engaging in election interference. And in this case, he's right. Or in this case, he's got a very strong argument that it really looks like the Colorado State Supreme Court looked at this and said, we really just don't like Trump. We don't want him to appear on the ballot. We think he committed insurrection. We can't prove it. Hasn't been proven in a court of law. He hasn't been convicted. But we're going to go ahead with this, and we're going to knock him off this. And it's going to create a giant headache. I think it probably also increases the chances that Trump is the nominee. We'll see what the U.S. Supreme Court says. Again, I think they're going to swat this down like Shaquille O'Neal, but I suppose stranger things have happened. But just a really bad decision, and it's probably going to ruin the holidays for all kinds of lawyers.
Yeah, and the Supreme Court justices who probably have to hear this before the January 4th date that it takes effect, or maybe they'll kick the can down the road a little bit, I guess. But a couple of follow-ups here. Jim, I remember after the Obamacare decision, and especially when he was running for president, Ted Cruz was saying he would not have voted to confirm John Roberts if, in fact, he had been in the Senate at the time. He would have preferred Michael Ludig, the guy he clerked for as a federal judge back in the 90s. Mike Ludig has been on NBC or MSNBC explaining why he thinks it's a dead certain lock that Trump fits Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. So you're probably not going to hear Ted Cruz repeat his wish that Mike Ludig was on the Supreme Court. But Mike Ludig is not the craziest part of MSNBC. That honor would go to Mara Gay, who was on Morning Joe today. Morning Joe, of course, with his typical just really disappointed with all of us tone that's always going on the show. And so he made the argument, or at least tossed the argument to Mara Gay that Republicans are saying, if you really believe that you're preserving democracy, why aren't you giving people the chance to vote for their candidate of choice? And here's how she responded to that.
Why are you standing with Confederates who betrayed this country? And this is what they're standing with, is the spirit of those Confederates rather than the Americans who came together after a long and brutal civil war that was fought to keep the Union together, and clearly saw a threat in ex-Confederates running for office, so much so that they amended the Constitution to prevent those traitors from running for office. That should send a message that our election system, our electoral system, can be used for nefarious purposes against the democracy itself.
So, Jim, she didn't use the Biden language from the Georgia election law debate of either you're with Abraham Lincoln or Jefferson Davis or all that kind of stuff. But throwing the Confederate label out there just for people who don't think this was the right decision is more than stirring the pot. It's throwing a match into a can of gasoline, I think.
Greg, I'm not going to say this wasn't worth discussing, but we've all kind of come to expect this from Mara Gay. It's not like she was going to come out and say, well, I really disagree with Trump, but this is treating him as if he's a convicted criminal when he hasn't even been indicted on this charge. So no, it can't go. That's how I see this. It is straightforward. If you are going to use committing a crime as the criteria to keep someone off the ballot, you got to have a conviction. Innocent until proven guilty. And we don't even have an indictment on this. So this to me, I see this as people reasoning backwards. I don't like Trump. I don't want Trump to be an option in 2024. I don't want Trump to win. Ergo, anything that keeps him off the ballot is good. Ergo, it must be right and constitutional. But that's not the case. So anyway, I could rant about this all. Greg, it's got me tearing my hair out.
Just a second. One of the reasons I wanted to play that is because I wanted to play this. This is Mara Gay in 2020 after Mike Bloomberg dropped out after spending $500 million. And this was her terrible math. She and Brian Williams on MSNBC. Remember this?
It has a possibility if he wants to spend $1 billion beating this guy, he could do it.
Absolutely. Somebody tweeted recently that actually with the money he spent, he could have given every American $1 million.
I've got it. Let's put it up on the screen. When I read it tonight on social media, it kind of all became clear. Bloomberg spent $500 million on ads. U.S. population, 327 million. Don't tell us if you're ahead of us on the math. He could have given each American $1 million and have had lunch money left over. It's an incredible way of putting it.
It's an incredible way of putting it. It's true.
It's not true. And obviously, we are way ahead of you on the math. And Jim, some people just they don't even make you really dig to figure out they don't belong on TV, or at least don't need to be taken seriously. And that was one of those crystallizing moments.
Yeah, I mean, it is an incredible figure in the sense that it is not credible. Like, literally, you can't believe it. And the second thing I just kind of observe is, Greg, who do you think does Mara Gay's taxes? Miss Gay, I'm looking at here. You've added up $1.7 trillion in deductions on a reasonable but modest 6-figure income, and that just seems like a lot. I don't know how you spent $1.4 trillion on office supplies. I figure NBC would give you that anyway, but. Yeah, this is the IRS is going to have an issue with this one. So. As
Jim alluded to, we are also sponsored today, and happily so, by Provia. Are you scared of inheriting that hair loss or thinning look just because it runs in the family? Now there's a real solution that delivers on its promise without the harsh side effects. No unwanted chemicals and no need for a prescription. It's called Provia. New customers save over 50% plus get free shipping on Provia's introductory package at proviahair.com/martini.
Provia uses a safe natural ingredient, Procapil, to effectively target the 3 main causes of premature hair thinning and loss. Provia supports healthy scalp circulation, delivers nourishing nutrients, and healthy hair follicle anchoring to your scalp. It's effective for men, women, any age, and it's safe on colored, treated, or styled hair.
Provia works, guaranteed, or your money back. But don't wait. Order now and save an extra 10% off just in time for the holidays at proviahair.com/martini. That's PROVIA hair.com/martini. All right, Jim. Talk about some fake news on MSNBC. Some fake news came from the White House podium again yesterday. And this wasn't even Karine Jean-Pierre. This was John Kirby, the national security spokesman over there. And he was asked about the tens of billions of dollars worth of military equipment that we left behind in Afghanistan as a result of our chaotic withdrawal now almost 2.5 years ago. And John Kirby just decided to gaslight us big time.
We didn't just leave a bunch of weapons in Afghanistan. This is a fallacy. This is a farce. What we did over the course of our 20 years in Afghanistan, of course, with congressional approval and consultations, was armed and helped equip the Afghan National Security Forces. Now, and as we have said time and time again, that as the Taliban made advances, those Afghan National Security Forces, many of them decided not to fight, but yet to lay down their arms and leave. But the arms that you're talking about, and again, I can't verify these specific reports, belong to the Afghan National Security Forces. That's what was left behind, not that the United States just walked away and abandoned a bunch of weapons in a pile in Afghanistan. That's just simply not historically accurate.
Jim, I can imagine the steam coming out of your ears. What was your reaction to that yesterday afternoon?
So there's a certain level of irritation or even fury when you see someone making, 1, not just a false argument, 2, not just a bad argument, 3, a bad argument like everybody can see through, but that you can even, like, separate from all that, you can find a better argument that might do the job, that might be closer to the facts. Look, nobody cares. Oh, we didn't leave those weapons in Afghanistan. The Afghan army, well, where did the Afghan army get the weapons from? And, this is self-evidently ridiculous. It's semantics. It's being pedantic. It is focusing on minor technical details to refute a much larger point that does not hold water. The stronger argument that Kirby could have made, he probably did not make this argument because it's a less satisfying argument. All these small arms that were left, all the rocket launchers, military vehicles, ground vehicles, I emphasize, the Taliban's probably going to be able to use all of that stuff. That's bad. That is, there's really no way to do it. If you're looking for a silver lining, I know it's going to shock you, Greg, but it turns out the Taliban, who want to bring the entire world to about the 9th century, they are not awash in skilled jet fighter and helicopter pilots. Go figure. You would have figured that they had their own little Top Gun running and that they were awesome, great pilots and all that stuff. But no, in fact, you may remember after the Taliban took over, one of our, I want to say it was a captured Black Hawk or something, was flying around in circles with the Taliban flag, and that was another great embarrassment. If you're looking for the good news, the silver lining, as I mentioned, the Taliban turns out aren't good at pilots. This is from Radio Free Europe back in May, so it's conceivable that circumstances changed a bit in the last 6 months. But the gist is the Taliban don't know how to fly planes. 2 pilots were killed after the U.S.-made helicopter crashed in the northern province of Samangan. On patrol, plunged to the ground after hitting an electricity pylon, according to the Taliban. It was the latest in 5 verified military aviation accidents recorded since the Taliban seized power in August 2021. All involved helicopters from the previous government's patchwork fleet of mostly U.S. and Russian-built aircraft, with pilot error considered the likely causes. Go figure. I thought the Taliban would be awesome. And they quote Amin Tarzi, director of Middle East Studies at the U.S. Marine Corps University, quote, I don't see the Taliban Air Force as something to worry about. If anything, it can become more symbolic. So that's the silver. Again, I'm not saying this is a great situation. I'm going to observe that the most advanced stuff we left there, the Taliban is probably not technically proficient enough to use effectively against anybody, really. Now, again, guns, you just point them and shoot them. Tanks, other vehicles, you're probably a little bit easier to use there. A less satisfying answer, but it has the advantage of being true. Instead, Kirby says, we didn't leave any weapons there. It was just that darn Afghan army.
Not smart. And if we hadn't bailed from Bagram, we could have given them the air support not only that they needed, but that we needed to evacuate in a much more orderly fashion and, get out the American people from Kabul and other parts of the country, Afghan allies and so forth. Of all the stupid things that happened, and there were legion of them, that's probably the stupidest one of all tactically. And then just leaving people behind after we promised not to, of course, is the worst one morally. But I guess they're test driving some ideas for how Biden's going to defend this debacle next year, but they're going to have to do better than that. And let's be honest.
Workshop that one. Go back to the drawing board.
Yeah. He's never recovered from that. There's no way they're going to be able to spin that story to his benefit next year. Anyway, Jim, that does it for our final regular edition for the year. But again, tomorrow starts our fantastic 6-part series on our 3 Martini Lunch Awards for 2023. And I'll give you a quick preview. Tomorrow is the most overrated, underrated, and honest political figures from 2023. So Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Do subscribe to the podcast if you don't already. Please tell your friends and family about us. We'd love to have even more folks listening to the podcast. Also, thank you for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch Podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Wednesday. And again, join us Thursday for the start of our special year-end editions of the 3 Martini Lunch.